My name is Sienna Rhodes, and if I could burn one night from memory, scorch it so clean that not even ash remained, it would be the night I found out the man I loved was fucking someone else. We'd been together almost 2 years. His name was Aiden Carter, funny. Golden, the kind of charming that made waitresses smile a little too long. I used to think he was sunlight in human form, but sunlight can blind you if you stare too long. I did. I stared until I couldn't see what was rotting underneath. It started with whispers, subtle changes. The way he turned his phone over on the table. The sudden gym obsession. The new cologne sharp, bitter. Not the warm cedar scent I gave him for his birthday. But the truth didn't whisper. It screamed. I was scrolling through my stories one night, wine in hand, brain on autopilot. And there it was, a tagged post from some club I'd never been to. A blurry video of Aiden's arm slung around a girl in a low-cut red dress, her face tucked into his neck. He was laughing, mouth open, eyes soft, not drunk, not even pretending. I didn't cry. Not right away. That came later. First came silence, cold, clean, and the kind of rage that makes you see every mistake you made in fluorescent lighting. I didn't scream. I didn't confront him. Not then. I let the night pass like smoke through a closed room. And the next morning, I kissed him on the cheek and asked if he wanted pancakes. He smiled, told me I was perfect. Perfect. I kept the mask on for 3 more weeks, long enough to gather proof. Messages, screenshots, timestamps. I knew who she was, Madison, a junior in college. She worked part-time at his gym. Blonde, soft-voiced. Probably thought she was in a Nicholas Sparks novel. She had no idea what she was walking into. But I didn't blame her. Not really. Because Aiden had made a career out of lying beautifully. And me, I had built a life out of believing him. But belief fades. And what grew in its place wasn't just anger. It was purpose. That's when I met him. Thomas Carter, Aiden's father. 52, divorced, silver-haired, controlled, with a smile like broken glass. Dangerous if you didn't know where to stab. He'd always watched me a little too long at family dinners. I used to write it off as creepy. But now, I saw it for what it was. Power. Fairly caged. I reached out to him with a lie, told him Aiden and I were on a break, that I was confused, heartbroken, that I needed someone to talk to. He invited me over that night. The moment his door closed behind me, I knew I wasn't just going to ruin Aiden. I was going to dismantle him. And the worst part, he had handed me the match. All I had to do was light it. Thomas lived in a sleek condo overlooking the city skyline. All glass and silence and whiskey shelves. The kind of place where everything was expensive, but nothing felt warm. It didn't matter. I wasn't there for warmth. He opened the door in a dark button-down, barefoot, hair mussed like he'd run a hand through it, 100 times debating whether this was a mistake. He didn't ask questions when he saw me, just stepped aside. We didn't talk for long. I fed him enough vulnerability to whet his appetite told him Aiden and I had drifted, that I felt invisible, that I missed being seen. Thomas listened like a man used to holding court, nodding in all the right places, letting his gaze linger in all the wrong ones. He poured me scotch. I pretended to like it. We talked about everything and nothing my work. His divorce, Aiden's childhood, which he spoke about like someone narrating a documentary. Distant, measured, clinical. No warmth there either, the more he shared. The more I realized Aiden hadn't come from charm. He'd learned it, watched it from the master. When Thomas touched my knee, I didn't flinch. And when he kissed me, I let him, not out of lust, not even revenge. Not yet. That came after. What I felt in that moment was control clean. Pure, something I hadn't tasted in weeks. I thought I'd feel dirty. I didn't. I felt awake. We didn't go to his bedroom. We didn't need to. The act itself wasn't about desire. It was war. Quiet. Tactical. Undeniable. When it was over, I got dressed in silence while Thomas watched me from the couch. Eyes narrowed like he wasn't sure if he'd just won or lost something. He asked if I was okay. I told him I was better than okay. I didn't spend the night. I didn't kiss him goodbye. But I did take a photo. Just a glimpse of his silhouette in the living room. Shirt, half buttoned. My earring glinting on the floor near his feet. It wasn't proof. Not really. But it didn't need to be. All it needed was suggestion. I sent it to Aiden the next night. No words. No context. Just the photo. Then I blocked his number. An hour later, he showed up at my apartment, banging on the door, yelling, demanding to know what it meant. I didn't answer. Let him scream. Let the neighbors watch. He'd shattered my trust in secret. I was dragging his world into the light, and the cracks were already forming. Later that night, I got a DM from Madison. Hey, I think we need to talk. I stared at the message for a long time, then typed, yes, meet me tomorrow. I'll explain everything, because I wasn't finished yet. Not even close. We met in a quiet park on the edge of town. Madison wore a hoodie pulled over her blonde waves. No makeup, eyes rimmed in red. She looked like a child, trying to play adult. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She approached me like I might slap her. I didn't. Thanks for meeting me, she said. I nodded. No small talk. No fake smiles. I just gestured to the bench. We sat in silence until she spoke again. He said you were crazy. I laughed. Low, sharp. Of course he did. I didn't know you two were still together. She rushed out. I swear. He told me you'd broken up months ago. That you were, I don't know, controlling, obsessed. There it was. The script. I pulled my phone out of my coat and handed it to her. Messages. Photos. Timestamps. She scrolled. Her hands started to shake. Oh my God, she whispered. I took the phone back. You weren't the first. Probably not even the fifth. But you were the one I needed. Her brow furrowed. Needed? I leaned in. To finish the story, Madison looked terrified, like she was suddenly realizing I hadn't come to cry with her, or share pain, or swap victimhood. I'd come to win. I know he told you I was a mess, that I was too much. But let me tell you something. Men like Aiden always say that when they meet a woman, they can't lie to forever. She didn't respond. Just looked down at her hands, then back at me. Did you really sleep with his dad? I smiled. Would it make a difference? Her silence was answer enough. He told me I wasn't special, she said finally, that he never made promises. Of course he didn't, I said. That's how men like him stay blameless. They never promise, so they never have to apologize. She looked at me with something like shame, but deeper. Recognition. I want out, she said. Good, I replied. But if you really want revenge, you're going to help me first. Her eyes widened. I slid a manila envelope across the bench, one I had prepared before this meeting even happened. Inside were old receipts, emails, texts Aiden had forwarded to me without thinking. Things he never should have written down. Contracts with clients where he fudged figures. Screenshots of him bad-mouthing his father to potential business partners. Madison stared at it like it might explode. What do I do with this? You give it to the board at Carter and Young. Anonymously. They won't trace it. But once it hits, his father's going to know exactly where it came from. She hesitated. He'll think it was you. I smiled. That's the point. She took the envelope. And with that, a piece of my past slid into someone else's hands. I wasn't just destroying Aiden. I was making sure the rubble buried him. deep enough that even his father couldn't dig him out. The fallout hit faster than I expected. 3 days after Madison sent the envelope, Carter and Young's internal review board suspended Aiden pending an investigation. Embezzlement, breach of contract, ethical misconduct. The words rang like church bells in the industry. He was officially radioactive. I heard about it before he did. An old contact from my brief stint in PR messaged me in all caps. Your ex just got nuked. I watched the news spread like oil in water. Quiet at first, then explosive. Twitter threads, LinkedIn whispers, screenshots surfacing from nowhere. Madison had done her job. Too well. Maybe. And Aiden, he panicked. He called from a different number. I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. Then he texted, Aiden, you vindictive little psycho. Aiden, you don't get to destroy me just because I stopped loving you. Aiden, do you have any idea what you've done? I read every word and deleted them all. He had no idea what I'd done. Not yet, because I wasn't finished. There was still the final blow, the confrontation. The moment where the knife stops being metaphorical. But first, I had to grieve something real. That night, I pulled out the Polaroid he gave me last year on our anniversary. It was the two of us at his lake house, my hair blowing across my face, him holding me like he was afraid I'd vanish. We'd written promises on the back, drunk and hopeful. His said, "You're the storm and the shelter. I'll never run." I held it over the sink, watched the edges curl as the lighter kissed it. He ran, but I didn't. I stood in the fire and learned how to breathe smoke. The next morning, I showed up at Thomas's office without warning. The receptionist blinked. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, "but he'll want to see me." She called up. 2 minutes later, I was on the elevator. Thomas looked surprised when I stepped inside. Impressed. Maybe. He motioned to the chair across from his desk. "You've been busy," he said, smoothing his tie. "I take it you heard about Aiden." I orchestrated it. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded like a man seeing a chessboard for what it really was. "Why come here?" "Because I want you to know I used you. What happened between us? It wasn't some twisted cry for validation. It was calculated." His jaw tightened. "Just slightly. I know, and I don't regret it." I added, "But I also know you're the one who leaked my photo to Aiden." He didn't deny it. He needed to be humbled. "No," I said. "You wanted to watch us both burn." He leaned forward. "So why come here now?" I reached into my purse and slid an envelope across his desk. Inside, a copy of the leaked photo, metadata restored, proof of his leak, and a copy of an NDA. I knew he'd violated the night he touched me. He opened it, read the contents, then met my eyes. "You're threatening me." "No," I said, standing. "I'm warning you. Stay out of it now, Thomas. This ends with your son, not with you." He watched me go, silent, still, but I could feel the rage crawling under his skin. Good. Let them both boil. Because now, it was my turn to end this. Face to face, fire to fire. He was waiting outside my apartment 2 nights later. I'd seen him through the peephole, leaning against the railing like a kicked dog with a chip on its shoulder. Same leather jacket, same cocky slouch. But his eyes, they looked different. Bloodshot, tired, dangerous. I opened the door slowly. He didn't say anything at first. Just stood there in the hallway of my building. Like he didn't remember how to move. Finally, "You really did it." I crossed my arms. "You'll have to be more specific." He let out a humorless laugh. "The board suspended me. My reputation's in the toilet. Madison dumped me. You cheated on me." I said, voice flat, then lied about it, then called me crazy for reacting. "That doesn't justify this, Sienna." My jaw tightened. You want to talk about justification now. After all the half-truths and gaslighting and guilt you weaponized against me for years. You slept with my father. He spat it like venom. Do you even understand how fucked up that is? I didn't flinch. I know exactly what it is. Why? Just tell me why. Was it to hurt me? No, I said. It was to remind you that I don't belong to you. Not your story, not your pity, not your version of me. His face twisted. So you decided to destroy everything instead. No, I said again. I decided to stop letting you win. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You think this makes you powerful? It makes you hollow. You torched your own life just to make me suffer. There, it was the last card. The guilt, the manipulation, the desperate attempt to make me doubt what I'd already burned to the ground. I stared at him, long and steady. You think I came out of this empty? I said. Maybe I lost things my name in some circles. A piece of my own piece. But I also got something you'll never understand. What's that? Freedom. His expression flickered. Hurt. Rage. Something deep and knotted he couldn't name. I never loved her, he said suddenly. Like it was a lifeline. It didn't mean anything. And yet, I whispered, it meant enough to end everything. We stood there, inches apart, two ruined kingdoms staring across the rubble. I hope it was worth it, he muttered, voice cracking. It was, I said, but not for the reason you think. Because revenge didn't taste like triumph. It tasted like survival. I stepped back inside and closed the door without looking back. His footsteps stayed in place for a long time, then, slowly, faded down the stairs. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just sat on the floor and breathed. Because when you burn down the house of lies you once called home, there's a moment of quiet afterward. And in that quiet, you finally hear your own voice. The online backlash came like a storm you could feel in your bones long before it arrived. Someone, probably one of Aiden's lackeys, maybe even Madison, in some twisted change of heart, leaked the story. Not the whole truth, just enough to light the match. Cheating boyfriend's ex sleeps with his father for revenge. It spread like wildfire. TikTok threads, screenshots, think pieces from people who didn't know my name, but sure as hell had opinions. Strangers dissected me like I was a villain on a show they binge-watched. Memes, commentary, hashtags I never wanted, slut, psycho, icon, queen of petty, feminist hero, toxic manipulator. They gave me titles like trophies and curses. None of them real. None of them mine. Jess was the one who found it first. Don't look, she said, phone in hand, eyes wide with protective panic. They've got your picture, the one from your graduation. Too late. I'd already seen. They were quoting my old posts, pulling photos from deep in my feed, judging the tilt of my smile, the outfits I wore, as if they could stitch together my soul from pixels and perception. And for the first time since I'd set this plan in motion, I felt something close to fear. Not of Aiden, not of Thomas, of losing myself in a story I no longer controlled. I deactivated all my accounts, wiped everything clean, let the world scream into the void, while I sat on the floor of my apartment with a blanket around my shoulders and a cup of tea I couldn't taste. Are you okay? Jess asked, sitting beside me. I don't know, I whispered, because I'd won. I knew that Aiden's career was tanked. Thomas had gone silent. And the people who once saw me as the sweet, loyal girlfriend had been reminded I was not to be trifled with. But victory hadn't brought peace, just silence that pressed into my chest like a weight. Maybe I went too far. I said quietly. Maybe I became what they said I was. Jess looked at me with that calm she always had when I was spiraling. No, she said, you became what they made you. There's a difference. And maybe she was right. But even now, I felt the line blur because revenge doesn't just cost you your enemies, it costs you the version of yourself that would have walked away. The girl who believed in redemption, in love, in simple apologies. I buried her somewhere between Thomas's sheets and Aiden's inbox. And what rose in her place was someone sharper, colder, but more honest. I wasn't a monster. I was a mirror. And if they didn't like the reflection, that wasn't my problem anymore. Still, something inside me knew this wasn't the end. It couldn't be. Because the most dangerous part of revenge is what it awakens in the people you leave behind. The first real sign that something was wrong came in a letter, a handwritten letter, of all things. No stamp, no return address, just a blank white envelope slipped under my door while I slept. The handwriting was sharp, masculine, familiar. You took my son from me. You took my name. Let's see what happens when I take yours. I read it twice. Then again, it wasn't signed. But it didn't have to be. Thomas. I'd expected silence from him, some stoic, old money retreat into damage control. But this was personal. Threats weren't his style. He played long games, legacy games, ones where people vanished from boardrooms and never got invited back. But now he was in my world. And suddenly, my name, Sienna Rhodes, didn't feel like armor anymore. It felt like a target. Jess found me an hour later, curled up on the couch, staring at the envelope like it might explode. What the hell is that? I handed it to her. She read it, then carefully set it down, as if handling a live wire. You need to report this. To who? I said, laughing bitterly. The cops. They'd yawn. He hasn't broken a single law. Jess's jaw clenched. Then we go public. I shook my head. That's what he wants. To pull me into the mud with him. To make me look hysterical. Paranoid. We sat in silence for a long time. He won't stop. She said finally, you humiliated both of them. This isn't over. I knew she was right. But I didn't realize how right until the job offers started vanishing. I'd been interviewing quietly, trying to rebuild, but one by one, the doors began to close. Emails that had once been enthusiastic now dripped with polite rejection. A creative director I'd known for years sent me a text. Sienna, I don't know what you did to piss off Thomas Carter, but people are backing away fast. Be careful. My chest tightened. He was burning the ground beneath my feet, one opportunity at a time. I'd hurt his son. Yes, but I'd also reminded him that his power had limits. Now he wanted to prove me wrong. And the worst part, it was working. For the first time, I didn't feel in control. I felt hunted. So I did the only thing that still felt like mine. I started writing, not an article, not a revenge essay, a memoir, truth, unfiltered, names included. If they wanted to control the narrative, they'd have to rip it from my hands. I wouldn't run, I wouldn't hide. They took my silence. They would not take my voice. And once this story was finished, the world would know the truth. Not just about Aiden, not just about Thomas, but about what it costs a woman to survive men like them. I wrote like I was bleeding every night. After the noise of the world died down, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, old journals, screenshots, and pain. I didn't hold back. Not this time. Not for them. Not for myself. I wrote about the way Aiden weaponized sweetness, how he kissed me like he meant it, while texting other girls from the bathroom. I wrote about Thomas and the calculated coldness in his eyes when he asked me if I was old enough to know what I wanted. I wrote about how the world cheered for a woman's rage until it got too close, too sharp. Then they turned on her, called her bitter, crazy, dangerous. I was all of those things, and I was still right. Somewhere around chapter 7, the fear started to dull. Writing gave me back what they tried to take: my shape, my voice, my ability to make sense of the wreckage. I wasn't just telling my story, I was reclaiming it. Jess read the first draft and sat in stunned silence afterward. "You're going to set something on fire with this," she whispered. "I hope so," I said. They've been playing with matches for years. We sent it to a small independent publisher, known for publishing women with knives in their prose. Within a week, they responded. "We want it, all of it, unedited, unapologetic." And just like that, I had a book deal. But the minute it went public, the next blow landed. Aiden went live. A shaky Instagram video. Eyes puffy. Voice cracked. "I've made mistakes," he said, staring into the camera like a martyr. But I never deserved to have my family used against me. What she did, it wasn't revenge. It was abuse. I'm telling my story, too. The comments were split. Some cheered. Some called him a narcissist. Others reposted the video with grainy screenshots of our texts, dissecting my side like it was a crime scene. And then came the podcast interviews. He called me a calculated manipulator, said I used sexual power to climb, said he had proof I blackmailed his father. Though, of course, none of it surfaced. I stayed silent for a while, let him shout into the void while I sharpened my final chapter. But the book was already in production. Advance copies went out, pre-orders exploded, and somewhere in the noise, Thomas Carter released a statement. Cold, corporate, legal. The allegations made in the upcoming memoir are categorically false and defamatory. I smiled when I read it, because it wasn't just a denial. It was a confirmation. He was scared. And soon. The only thing more powerful than their silence would be my story. The truth. Carved in ink, permanent, unforgivable. Coming for them like a storm with my name written in every cloud. The morning of the release, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, knees drawn to my chest, watching the sun crawl up the brick across the street. The first box of author copies had arrived 2 days earlier. 10 matte black books with my name etched in silver. Like tombstones for the versions of me I'd buried. Unmade, a memoir by Sienna Rhodes. It was no longer just revenge. It was record. By noon, the first review dropped in The Atlantic. They called it a brutal, unflinching dismantling of power, masculinity, and the myth of the perfect victim. An hour later, Aiden went live again, but this time, he didn't cry, he raged. She's monetizing her trauma. He spat into the camera, jaw tight, and dragging my family into it for clout. I watched with detachment, like he was an actor in a play I'd already seen 100 times. He didn't know it yet, but the play was almost over. That afternoon, I got a call from Harper Cole, the senior editor at my publisher. "Hey, you're not going to believe this," she said. Voice electric. "The New York Times just bumped you to front page review next week. And we got a call from a production company." My breath caught. "They want the rights. They want you." Everything blurred for a second. I gripped the edge of the counter, heart slamming in my chest. This wasn't just vindication, it was power. Real power. The kind men like Aiden and Thomas had always assumed I would never touch. And with power came response. Thomas's team released a cease and desist letter. Aiden tweeted something vague about defamation suits pending. His followers rushed to his side. Some offered legal advice. Some sent me threats. But their noise was background now, because I knew what they didn't. You can't threaten someone who's already survived the worst version of you. The next morning, I walked into a live interview on a podcast with 3 million subscribers. The host leaned into the mic. "Sienna, let's start with the obvious. What do you say to the people calling your memoir an act of revenge?" I smiled. "I say they're right." A pause. "But what they miss?" I continued. the voice is steady, is that sometimes revenge is survival, wearing sharper clothes. I didn't write this book to destroy men. I wrote it to warn women. That clip alone hit 6 million views in 2 days. Messages flooded in. Some hateful, but many weren't. Women from everywhere, telling me I said what they couldn't, that I gave them language for the betrayal no one believed, that I made them feel less alone. That's when it hit me. I hadn't just taken something from Aiden and Thomas. I'd built something for myself, for others. And no court, no smear campaign, no PR machine could unwrite what I had turned into truth. But I knew one thing still remained: the confrontation, not with Aiden, not with Thomas, with me. Because even now, beneath the headlines and the power, I still hadn't asked myself the hardest question of all. Was the cost worth it? And what had I truly lost in the fire I lit? The night before the first book tour event, I stood alone in the green room of a small indie bookstore in Seattle, staring at my reflection under cheap fluorescent lights. The copies of Unmade were stacked like tiny monuments outside the curtain. People were already seated, waiting, expecting. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow, not broken, just quieter than I expected. Because the truth was, I had won, and yet, as I traced the smudged mascara beneath my eyes, I realized something had been left behind in the rubble, something I hadn't mourned properly. I had lost her, the girl who used to laugh without second-guessing herself, who believed in text-back goodnights and Sunday morning pancakes, and the kind of love that didn't turn mean when no one was watching. The girl who, for a moment, believed Aiden's promises, who wore soft sweaters and smiled in pictures without staging them. She was gone, and I missed her. When they called me on stage, I stepped out into applause that felt too loud, too wide. Faces turned toward me, smiling, waiting to hear from the woman who'd burned a man's empire to the ground. I didn't read from the first chapter like I'd planned. I opened to the last page and read what I had never shared aloud before. Revenge didn't make me whole. It made me clean. And in that clarity, I finally saw what they were always afraid of. A woman who doesn't need to be liked, just heard. When I looked up, some people were crying. One woman in the front row clutched the book to her chest like it had kept her alive. And suddenly, I understood. This story was no longer just mine. It belonged to anyone who had ever been silenced, or gaslit, or made to feel small by someone who smiled with their teeth. After the signing, I stepped outside into the rain and found Jess leaning against the brick wall, holding 2 coffees. She handed me one. "How's it feel?" "Like breathing underwater," I said. She smiled, then turned serious. "You know this isn't over, right? Thomas still has pull. Aiden's not done crying on camera." "I know," I said, "but I'm done playing defense." We stood there in the quiet, the storm fading into drizzle. People passed us, not recognizing me, not seeing the battlefield behind my eyes. Just another woman in a coat, holding coffee in the rain. And that's what I wanted. Not fame, not fear, just the right to exist without apology. Later that night, in my hotel room, I opened my journal and wrote 4 words across the top of a new page. "You do not win." And I meant it, because they might try to rebuild. They might twist the narrative again. But I was no longer someone they could shape. I was the wildfire, and I'd learned how to burn without destroying myself.